Hey everybody, welcome to another live event with the Sinkhole. We are doing something a little different tonight. We're diving into a track that I built and arranged, composed, whatever you want to call it, for sync licensing purposes. Me and my friend Mark have been fighting with technology for the last 30, 45 minutes trying to get it all figured out. We thought we had it all good to go. Like we planned this I don't know how many weeks ago, quite a bit, like three or four.
Yeah, a few weeks ago.
Tested it all out, and of course, as soon as we get it all up tonight, it's like mass chaos. But it's good. I think we got it in a workable kind of space. So, yeah, the goal of tonight is really just to walk through a track. I'll let you listen to the whole thing first, kind of get an idea of what it is. I'll talk about kind of what it's for, what I could kind of imagine it being used for, some of the thought processes and ideas that go into like building a track like this. And then really, I'm just going to start piece by piece talking about all the different elements and how I go about doing it. There's a few different topics that I'm going to talk about specifically, but I also want to have interaction from you guys. So if you have thoughts or questions or anything like that in regards to what's going on here or what was this plugin or anything like that, just feel free to hit me up and I will try to keep it as interactive as possible. So yeah, and don't feel bad if you've got questions and you're like, well, this may be a stupid question. There are no stupid questions, right? So if you're brand new to this stuff, a lot of it may be foreign, and I may be talking about something without realizing that I haven't explained it very well. Just wave your arms up in the air and let me know that I'm not explaining something. I promise I'll stop and take the time to do that. So. Okay, Mark, anything else that we need to cover kind of before we jump into things, or are we good?
No, I think we're good to go. Yeah, if you want to share your screen, we can get that pulled up
Yep,
and
let me get
go
that
ahead
going
and
quick.
play through.
Okay, you are seeing Logic in here, hopefully, if everything's working. And I'm just going to go ahead and play through this all the way one time. It is about 2 minutes long, and then I'll kind of dissect it a little bit. So here we go. Oh, key change. Something weird about like when you pitch down certain MIDI notes, and it loops it back. If you don't have the automation right in on the next MIDI region, it does some weird
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
But yeah, always a
Very
fun
cool.
bug to throw you off. But yeah, so that is that's the track. It's
Tip
you
number
know,
one, don't key change.
yeah. Please don't put key changes into your tracks for sync. That's a good way to get rejected very quickly. Yeah, so really, like, I guess the first thing I wanted to talk about is just the kind of sonic qualities or what you're hearing. When I started sync, I didn't have like a good frame of reference on what a sync track needed to kind of sound like in general. And if I heard something like this, I would say like it feels a little empty, like it's missing something, right? Like it's missing what you would call like a top line or some like in your face melody lead line to really grab your attention and stuff like that. And that's left out on purpose because this is meant to support something, right? So I could see this track kind of being used in a reality TV type situation or even like an advertising type thing. It could kind of go both ways, I think. And creating something like this is different than like starting a track with a big lead idea and then supporting it. You're creating all the support kind of stuff first. So I'll just kind of dive into the different elements of this. I broke it down into, I color coded it for you guys. I don't normally, I'm confessing, I don't normally like color code all of my tracks just because I'm going through them quickly, and I arrange them so I kind of already know where stuff is, but just so you guys can see it a little bit better. It's just bass. I've got some synths in here. There's a little simple lead here with the synth, right? Kind of ethereal thing going on. Got the electric guitars kind of in the background. And if you notice, I actually muted a bunch of them because it was feeling too busy. So I took out a bunch of them. This is more in your face kind of stereo pan stuff with some clicks that I didn't fade out correctly. There's a reason this one didn't go anywhere. Right? Vocal effects, I want to talk about that in a second. And then down here, I've got all my drums, right? So I pieced together a bunch of different things from different places and adjust them in different ways and create an entire kind of kit from different pieces. A lot of times I will break out my kick and my snare completely, but for this one, it just kind of worked to leave them in that particular loop together and stuff. So and then down here I've got 1 2 3 4 5 6 tracks of just transition effects. Okay, so soloed, this sounds like this, right? So in context it sounds like this. So you could hear that there, kind of an impact, right? Okay, so yeah, those are all the kind of pieces of it. And when I start building something like this, usually for a track like this, the bass is kind of like the main thing, right? That's kind of driving everything. I would start with a simple click, and then I would pull up my bass. And just create a little loop, something that I can kind of like play around with, right? So I get the little loop going. I might play around with some kicks, some snares. If I were pulling in, like if I were just creating something simple, like a 4 on the floor, like kick, on every quarter note sort of thing, a lot of times I would just pull something directly. Let me actually see if I can do this quick. I'm gonna pull in a kick that I have.
While you're pulling that up, just because it's relevant, Paul did have a question.
Yeah,
Was this
absolutely.
created was this created for a specific client brief, or is it something you just came up with hoping to shop? So you can kind of talk to like,
Yeah, yeah,
why you
yeah.
made this.
So this one was not for a specific brief, and for those that are kind of wondering what that means, certain libraries and different even entities, music supervisors, different people that need music will throw out emails or even text messages saying, "Hey, we need this. Sometimes by this deadline, this is what it needs to sound like. Please send us what you have." And a lot of people will write specifically for that. So that would be a brief. Other times, you create tracks like this in hopes that it can find a home and you send it off to somebody and say, "Hey, I've got this." Other times it's more like direct communication, like somebody will not send a mass brief out but like send an email directly to you, say, "Hey, I need you to work on this project, 10 tracks, this style, can you do something like that?" So those are all different types of scenarios where you would potentially you know, or the kind of the way in which these would get to whoever needs them. This one was meant strictly for pitching to people, and it's something that I never even really got around to. So I worked on this probably like a year ago and just never for whatever reason, got distracted with other things, more important projects and stuff like that. So it's just been sitting on my hard drive for well over a year. That's why it's kind of a good candidate for something like this, because normally I would not be able to play a track if it were going to a library because of, you know, copyright and even audio detection type things, YouTube strikes stuff. If my library or publisher decides to put it up somewhere and this on YouTube gets flagged as it being something that they are exclusively licensing, then that could cause issues. So, did I explain that like clearly, Mark? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so I mean, the general idea is
Paul
that
says
like,
yes.
okay, that's good. You know, if this were going to some actual library, I probably wouldn't be able to do this. But this one is officially educational use only at this point, I guess. So
Perfect.
we may even revisit it at some point. You know, in the sinkhole and stuff, or it might even be fun to like make it all available as a project to people to mess around with or something. But anyway, let's. I'm gonna talk about a few specific things. There are some stuff or some items that were brought up. People had a few questions about in regards to things like edit points, intros, outros. If you notice, I'll jump right into the edit point side of things. If you notice, there are a few spots where things just kind of like chill out for a second, right? Like it's almost a whole measure there where it's like just goes away, right? And my metronome's on. Okay, so let's talk about edit points, what they actually are. Edit points really are opportunities for an editor to chop up your track in a way that sounds a little bit more natural on their end, right? So if you think about it from an editor's standpoint, they are wanting to use your track probably in more ways than just playing it from start to finish. They might need it for a little piece of something. They might need it for three separate things. And the more options that they kind of have to play around with your music and to chop it up in a way that sounds natural, the better or the easier their life is going to be, right? So let's say, actually, here, there's two of them specifically in this track. There's one there after what would kind of be, I would guess, called the intro. There's a little edit point. And then there's this little build section. And then after that, it kind of goes into like what I would call like the final section, right? It's just a little bit bigger, more in your face in general. And this one is probably even more important than this edit point, right? Like I could get away with maybe not having this one here, but this one's pretty important because if you listen to music in like say reality TV or even in ads and advertising type scenarios, a lot of times there will be like some kind of like build anticipation moment and then it switches into kind of another gear, right? It's a pretty normal sort of thing you hear in this type of music. And this gives the editor a certain place and time to have like a big transition or a scene change sort of thing, you know? So they can use this in a lot of different ways. I'll let you hear this one just one more time. So if you notice, it kind of hits here, trails off a little bit, and then it kind of sweeps back into this next big section. So as an edit point, I should have prefaced this entire thing with this little bit of information. Everything I'm saying is up for debate, okay? Because there really is 101 different ways to approach production music. Everybody's gonna, even libraries will disagree on the perfect type of track and different things because ultimately they're using it for different kind of scenarios and stuff like that. I have tracks that have done extremely well with absolutely no edit points whatsoever. And then, you know, I've had tracks with edit points that have done really well too. So there's no like absolute right and wrongs, I guess. There's only things to think about that might give it a better chance of getting used, if that makes sense. That's probably the best way to think about all these little things. Sarah, you had a question. What was it about the 2-minute minimum?
Yeah. I pulled it up because you're basically answering it. How many do you need? And then
the edit points.
Yeah, how many you need? Always make the like musical choice. Would you agree with that? It's like don't chop this up and like, oh, I need one more edit point, so you like take the musicality out of it because they're not going to use that.
Exactly. Don't
make the musical choice.
Don't make it so awkward that it just feels like you're forcing them in there. It should feel like kind of moments in the music where you could have a break or like a cutoff and it still works with the song, right? And that kind of works amazingly in a lot of different genres. Like it works for something like this, but also works for like a hard rock cue where like the drummer does a big fill and lands and then waits a measure and then comes back in real quick. You know, you can integrate that kind of stuff into all kinds of genres, almost any genre, I think. I mean, yeah, I'm trying to think of something where it wouldn't really work, but
like a drone.
Yeah, maybe a drone, maybe some smooth jazz or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, at the end of the day, it comes down to just make the most musical choice. It's going to be stylistically appropriate. Yep. Relating to that, Elijah asked, how many measures do you need for the pause/edit points? 1 measure, 1.5, till all the ring is gone. I mean, answer what you think too, but I just make it musical. Is my 2 cents.
I think it is helpful if it doesn't like cut off and then instantly come back in, because they are looking for tails to kind of like, you know, fade out quickly so that it does sound more natural, if that makes sense. So if I were to bounce this out as audio right now, you would see the reverb tail of this right here go down and then right, so you can kind of hear, like if we were to visualize that, the reverb tail would kind of come down and then it sweeps back up. That down, the lowest point where that reverb tail goes is going to be where they cut it off and fade it out a little bit before they bring the next section in somewhere, right? So be thinking of that, but again, like Mark said, make it sound musical first. A real fast edit point probably isn't going to be like if I had it stop right here and then it comes back in right here, like that's probably not going to be usable because the sounds itself are going to kind of carry over just a little bit. So give them at least like a measure. Sometimes I've done longer edit points, but I've also done that a few times and thought that sounds, you know, a little unnatural. So Yeah, like Mark said, let the music kind of make the decision for you, make it sound natural, but try to provide those in as many. Because here's the other thing, there may be scenarios where people or an editor uses this track straight through, even with the edit points intact. So if it sounds unnatural, you eliminate that possibility from them using it that way too, you know. So keep it sounding like one cohesive musical track, and then just throw them in there as it makes sense. I can't think of any that I've had more than like 3 edit points in. Maybe 3 here and there, but yeah, not a ton.
The way that you craft edit points, you can also create really easy usages. Like can you start your track just with that swell in right before measure 41? So before he pushes play, imagine we're coming back from a commercial break, and this is how the show starts with like a flyover montage scene.
Right.
Perfect. And you just did. This is something we've talked about before, is like making the editor's life super easy. Imagine if like the editor at the taxi rally that always gave the presentation was Laurel Ostrander, and she like made this super clear. She's like, if I had to pick between 2 tracks and one already has a swell and one doesn't, I don't care if the other one's slightly better, I'm using this one. You just made my life easy. Drag and drop. Like that's perfect.
Yeah, those transition elements, and we can kind of talk about those for a moment in general, really do help. I feel especially for like pop and funk, and well, again, I use it in probably almost every genre, but that's just kind of my style. I don't know if I've used it in like a lot of the rock stuff I've done, but the idea is that it just kind of brings something in, like it gives that transition. It doesn't sound like an abrupt start. Now it sounds like a, you know, that's the kind of starting point for whatever section you're going into, right? Oh, that was the wrong one. Here we go. Okay, so I use vocal effects there, and I want to talk about that in a second. But anyway, these are, you can make your own. You could sign up for this awesome thing called Free Sample Friday and get some from a good friend of mine. Shout out to Mark for taking the time to create risers and all kinds of cool things and stuff like that. Yeah.
That's why I do it.
Yeah, so this is a perfect case, you know, or use case kind of for stuff like that. You could put 2 risers next to one another, reverse one side of it, and create your own kind of transitional thing. I don't think I did this with any of these, but this is actually a scenario which a lot of times I will use automation. So let's say I have a transition, like I'm in here, and I like the way it sounds, but it's coming in a little too slow for me. What I'll do real quickly is get my automation curve tool, and I'm sure this looks a little different for every DAW, but what I'm doing is this is just volume here, and I just add a little curve, so now it will come in faster, right? And I can make it even faster if I wanted. Right, so that's a real fast kind of transition. Something, if I didn't want a longer, you know, swooping up into it thing, I could just have my own automation. And I will do that like probably on 80 to 90% of the tracks I work on for sync stuff. I'll automate in automation or volume automation for transitions and things like that. So yeah, something to keep in mind. It's very nice for just creating custom swooshes and stuff like that. So okay, I could kind of go a few different directions right now. Well, I've got the automation open. Let me talk about that. Here's what I used to do and what I don't do anymore. When I started, I would automate the heck out of everything, thinking that I was probably a better mixer than I was, and thinking that like a half a dB of a synth here and maybe minus 1 dB of a snare in a certain part was really going to make a real big difference. I don't do a ton of that unless it's like unless it's not a sync track. Like if I'm working on somebody's vocal track for like as client work or something, I will take my time and automate a lot of the little inconsistencies and sometimes even dynamically work on the track instrumentation wise with just very subtle things. But most of the times I'm not doing that for sync tracks in general. What I will automate a lot is filters. So if for those that aren't familiar with Logic or don't really know what they're looking at, this is the automation line for a high cut frequency done in Logic's built-in EQ. So I'm just going to pull that up and I'm going to let you kind of hear what it's doing, and you'll see the representation of the automation, or like you'll see it visually what it's really doing here. Okay, so really, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. You take a low pass filter and you just open it up over time. That's what this diagonal line is. It's just opening that up until we reach here. And if you remember kind of where that was in the track, it was during the build. So that's like adding energy to the whole build section right there. So starts down, opens up, keeps going, some new elements added in there, and then we're into the final section where it's open completely. I use this kind of stuff a ton, especially in pop, funk things, because it's just so easy to maintain the energy of the track by using filters. So you're bringing certain elements back for down sections, you're opening them up during builds, and then for big sections they're wide open, have a nice kind of big sound or whatever. So I use that a ton. Actually, this is probably a really good spot to talk about one of the most important uses of automation in a sync track. I made the mistake. Oh, that's not looking good. This is because I didn't actually finish it. That's going to be my excuse. If you notice, I'm at the end of the track. So if I were to bounce this in Logic or export it in Logic, the beginning of my track would start right there and the end would be right here. This is the volume automation for my stereo out. So in other words, this is the very last stage before it's actually exported into a WAV file or MP3, whatever I'm creating, right? And this volume automation is taking the very end of the track and just slowly fading out so it goes to absolute, what is that called? Zero? Null? I'm not actually sure. I don't know.
Yeah.
What the technical term is null. Yeah, it sounds good.
And why do we do that?
I do that because actually, I won't say which library, but a certain library called me out on it and helped me understand why it was important. I had at times exported when I first started doing this, so I had exported some tracks that still had a little bit of a reverb tail at the end of my track. So when they got to the end of the track, it actually like had a little bit of audio information there, and then it cut off completely. So there was a little bit of like an abrupt, jarring sort of sound. It wasn't massive. It wasn't like super noticeable, but enough to where if somebody were to listen to it and wanted a nice, very clean, rounded off end that sounded perfectly natural, they wouldn't get that. They would hear that, chop off at, where I was ending the track. So I usually add this into every single track that I work on for sync now, just to make sure. I'll let you kind of see. You'll, yeah. I don't know if you can see it there.
And you can add a curve to that too.
Yes, you can.
That's
Sometimes I
usually what
will
I
too.
do. I'll
Yep.
zoom way in and then just make it as extreme curve as possible.
Yeah, I use the curve in case that isn't clear. This is what Mark's talking about. You can do the automation curve and curve it up. Actually, I can't imagine you'd want to curve it down. I mean, I guess it depends on the track, but for this one, it made sense to just kind of leave it like this, I think, and I'll let you hear the end of it real quick. Right. The reason I picked it to look like that is because that's what sounded natural. That's what sounded musical, to me or whatever. To have that kind of slope with the downward volume automation. So, okay. I'm hoping I'm not going too fast or flying through any of these things. Did I miss any questions? Are we doing all right?
We do have a couple questions. I'll kind of interject them when they're appropriate. Otherwise, if you want to take questions, I can bring them in too. I have a few starred.
Okay, yeah. Let me. I'm trying to cover a few. I want to talk about the vocals real quick, and then maybe we can jump to some questions. There's so much stuff. I could probably talk for a whole nother hour, like about all the different pieces and the. I do want to. I'm thinking about all the things I really want to cover. I want to talk about some of the plugins, the virtual instruments, real quickly. So I'm going to try to go real quick and see how much I can get through. Okay. One of the things that people are always wondering, and there's always a lot of confusion about, is vocal samples, splice samples. Here's the first rule in using anything is you need to clarify very, very clearly, explain to your library or ask them what they're okay with. Okay, most libraries will say no melodic samples. Most will say you can't use anything that sounds like a melody or has some like character to it that is going to show up on a software detection program that's listening for certain elements of your music. Okay, so that has been an issue, I think, and has caused issues in the past where people will download, like, say, a sample from Splice, throw it in there. It's a very detailed and recognizable vocal sample with a certain sort of processing all built into it. Somebody throws it right into the project without touching it, creates a track, sounds great, signs it to a library. They don't think about it for a few years. Then next thing you know, somebody else does the exact same thing with the exact same sample. And now all of a sudden you've got two tracks that are sounding a little too similar, and it's being picked up by these audio detection softwares as being the same track. Okay, so that's really the worst case scenario. And that's why a lot of libraries are saying no splice in general. So what I do is, if I'm wanting to build, this is a good example. I had a specific library that said we don't allow splice at all. And I asked them, I clarified, I said, because they asked me to do an album of kind of pop stuff that used like vocal chop type of things all the time. And I said, hey, what do you think about this? I know you said no splice, but what if I allow you to hear the original and then let you hear it in context and see if it sounds recognizable at all to you? And they were totally fine with that, because I explained to them that my processing and everything that I do to the sample completely alters it enough from the original that it's not recognizable. So all that to say, you need to talk to whoever you're working with and make sure that they are on board with any samples ultimately that you're using. Some people will say no splice whatsoever, and if you try to sneak splice in there, even if it's like, I don't know, a drum loop or something, that kind of feels a little like, you probably should have checked with them, right? I'd say it's always better safe than sorry. But anyway, this is a vocal sample from Splice, and let me show you real quickly the type of processing that I put on this. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to take all this off. And then I'm going to unreverse it and let you hear the original. Okay. Right? So that by itself is not melodic. It's not like doing a recognizable pattern that people are going to pick up. It's one single note, right? From there, I reversed it. So now it's got that swell thing. Okay. Still kind of similar. This is a compressor. That's not going to change the sound a whole lot. This, however, is going to change the sound a ton. If you don't know what Little Altar Boy is by Sound Toys, a 4-man shifter, just I don't even know how to explain it. It's like changing the shape of your resonance vocal stuff. That's the technical term. I don't know, but let me let you hear it. Right, that's without it. Okay. Totally different, right? Changing it completely. Add some, that is reverb, some EQ. So I filtered it out. If you check this out, like I took a lot of the high end off of it. And then Kickstart is a side chain compression kind of simulator. Without getting too much into that, it's basically for with this setting, it's cutting out volume at the beginning of every quarter note to give it a little bit of a vibe. Sorry, hold on one second. Go out for a second, buddy. My son is heading to bed and had a question for me. So, okay. So anyway, that is the new vocal effect, right? And in the context of the song, right? It's just a little effect. So that's kind of how I approach doing vocal type stuff. Sometimes I'll actually create a sampler instrument and play it with like melodic information and stuff. Thanks, yeah, Terrell. Dude, being a dad is a full-time job. It doesn't stop for the Sinkhole live events. So I'm sure all the parents out there understand how that works. Yeah, so that's vocals, right?
Well, I think it's important to point out too that generally you're going to be a lot safer using one shots like that. Like you didn't use a vocal loop. Like that's a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also.
Yep. Another approach that is kind of fun that I like to do if I am needing something a little bit more character, like with more character, I will take a melodic vocal sample, like somebody singing a line with a bunch of words, but then chop all of the individual words up and then completely rearrange it, reverse stuff. Just, again, finding creative ways to make it completely unrecognizable. This won't work for every genre, of course. Like if you're making a, like a folk acoustic, and percussion sort of thing, you're not going to want to throw vocal samples in there probably. But I don't know. Who knows? Maybe you could start something new, make it cool somehow. But yeah, this is kind of the approach that I take with vocal stuff in general. So, all right, I think before I go too far into like all the plugins and effects that I use and stuff like that, maybe we jump to some questions. Does that sound good?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go in order. Okay. So the first one we had, I'm going to just on star ones you've already answered.
Okay.
Sarah early on had asked, how did you EQ the bass? It sounds very present, but not too boomy.
Oh, okay. So, well, let me just pull it up. I'll walk you through it real quick. Moto Bass, phenomenal plugin. A lot of fun in general. A lot of cool sounds in here. That's where the bass, what am I trying to say? Like the foundational sound of the whole bass thing here, right? Some of this is probably a little unnecessary. This is compression. This is more compression, but what this is actually doing, well, let me take everything off and I'll let you hear piece by piece what it's doing. We'll start with Shaper Box. Okay, so this is just moto bass. Very like usable sounding already. It's already great. Okay, so this added, I think, a little bit of drive, a little bit of character, some high end. You kind of hear that in there. Sounds a little more present. This is probably going to do the same thing. Yep. So just a little more compressed, a little more present. And actually, I might even like just pushing the master just a little too hard. It was starting to distort a little bit. Okay, so that's with those. Then the chorus. So if you notice, there's a little bit of stereo width in there now, right? It's kind of mono. All of a sudden it becomes stereo with that chorus, right? This is from Slate. It's just like a couple of compressors, a little bit more compression, maybe a little bit of EQ, but I don't think there's much actually happening in there. Here we go. Yep. So the theme here is a lot of compression. This bass, it definitely has a lot of compression on it. And what that's doing is killing a lot of the dynamics in a way, but also helping it be a lot more present in the mix, you know? And then kickstart is the thing where it cuts out a little bit with the... Hear how kind of, it's a little hard to tell, but like if I throw this way up, that would be like EDM style side chain, but just a little bit kind of helps it groove with the kick and the drums. Let me get some drums going so you can... Yeah. So, basically, to answer your question, it's mostly moto bass, and all I did is threw some compressors on it to kind of add a little character, add a little bit of drive to it, which brought up the high end, and added some stereo width with the chorus, a little bit more compression with some Slate plugins, and then a kickstart side chain type thing to kind of help it groove with the kick. So I hope that answered your question, Sarah.
And to your credit as well, something that you didn't point out, but that I know I can tell you did very well, is a lot of EQ is actually going to come down to your arrangement choices. So if you notice, he doesn't have a lot of other elements in the track that are fighting for that same space. So one of the easiest ways to make the bass sound like it has a lot of bass and take that presence is to not have a bunch of other stuff down in that range that's fighting for it. So if you leave that space open for the bass, it can fill it appropriately, instead of having a low end synth down there and a low end some big boomy kick that's fighting and a bunch of other stuff that's fighting for that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And this track in general is somewhat sparse, for that exact reason. Like, I didn't want a low synth in there that would muddy up. In some tracks it might need something like that, but for this, I think like the more opportunity you give like the bass to kind of shine, the better, for something where that's really what's taking the spotlight for the most part. So yeah.
Absolutely. You want to take a couple more questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, next in order we have Andy. He asked, are you utilizing parts from the intro in the climactic section towards the end?
I'm trying to see if I understand what he's asking. Are you utilizing parts from the intro in the climactic section towards the end? What parts are you referring to, Andy? At the very beginning, I used like a little reverse kick thing. So if you notice this, It's got a click in there too. That's gonna bug me on its own, but in the midst of the track. But the general idea is, I don't know if this will answer your question or not. You can clarify if not. But the general idea with the entire track is that the intro starts pretty stripped down. And then you notice there's just a few little elements thrown in, like some extra vocal things, that little synth lead.
I think he's more asking if there's any, like literally any parts you copy and pasted, because you just added just any parts that you're putting together to make it climatic. So like if you're taking parts like a percussion loop from the intro and using that same loop in the climax, I'm guessing is what he's asking.
Yeah.
Like layering wise.
So the kick snare is reused. The clav thing, that's used at the end. I brought that in at the beginning of the second section, and then it's at the end as well. The hat and claps, that's there. The busy hats, this is kind of where a lot of the energy. No other part of the song has that in there. Right? So that's not, that's not there. All those little things just kind of add energy overall, and sum together, they create that, that bigger sound. So if I understood correctly, yes, I am reusing things. These are literally copy pasted MIDI sections. I'm not playing this via my MIDI controller 15, 20 times or whatever. This is the exact same, obviously cut out for some of the edit points and stuff, the exact same MIDI regions, right? So ultimately, like, what you would probably want to be able to do is get a track done like this in anywhere between, I think a good pace to shoot for is probably like 4-5 hours at most. This should not be something that takes you a week to make, right? Tracks like this, doing tracks like this for sync, speed is really, really the key to making it worth your time. If you're putting out, 4 tracks a month, your royalty checks are going to be pretty disappointing for like the first, 15, 20 years of doing sync licensing, right? You have to be able to crank out tracks if you want to start seeing some income from it. So yeah, speed comes with time, but it's a must for success. Yeah, you do. But when I started, I was very slow. I second guessed everything. I went back and remixed everything and thought that mix was going to make it the one that helped me get my first placement. It's just a matter of doing it enough and spending enough time in it that you kind of begin to get a real good workflow and throw stuff together quickly. Then it becomes less about worrying about all the technical stuff and more just about creating and, for me, having fun. Like, this was a fun track to make, like just throwing some bass down, find some drum stuff, playing guitar on top of it. All that is just it's kind of fun. So
all right, one last stored question here from Paul, two-parter, so I'll kind of read this together. Do you have a standard amount of time you fade to null? I think the goal is to make it sound natural, but you don't want too long of a ring-out tail. I often strive for 1 full measure, or if it's really rich in reverb, 2 measures.
Yeah, I would say for me personally, now this is one of those things where you're probably going to get different answers from every composer and maybe even every library as to what is going to be perfect for them, because I've noticed the more I've talked to different libraries and different publishers, the more they kind of have their workflow and their clients ingrained into what they communicate to their composers, right? So they will say, oh, well, always give me this, or always make sure that you do this. Like, that needs to happen all the time. Well, for them, it will. Like, I'll do that for them every time I'm making them music, but I won't necessarily do it the same way for somebody else. So, for the tail thing, the fade outs and stuff, for something like this, a measure is probably more than enough, in my opinion. But if it were a faster song and something with a more like sharper kind of stinger ending, I may not even let it ring out that long. I may do it shorter. Other ones with a more chill and down tempo, relaxed vibe, or maybe some more free flowing type sounds, it may be longer than that. I don't really shoot for a specific like I want it to be one measure or 1.5 or whatever like that. I try to just go with what sounds natural with the song, and then do it accordingly or whatever. So, yeah.
Right, and then Sarah just asked, it looks. Where did you get the drum loops? It looks like you're using just the Oliver packs from Splice. Is that correct?
Yep. Some of them are Splice. Some of them, I don't think they all are. Maybe they all are. I don't know. It's been a while since I've looked at this. But yeah, a lot of times, I should clarify too, just to be safe, I usually will, let me show you how this works. Like if you've got in Logic, screwing up my track. When I pull in a loop from Splice, oh yeah, this is a good example. Okay, so my my tempo is 120, right? This original tempo was 108. I had to bring this down to fit into. I had to time stretch it basically. It normally would have looked something like this, right? Oh,
you automated your stereo out.
I sure did. I'm gonna get rid of it. Yeah, that doesn't sound right. But anyway, you get the idea. Like I had to time stretch it. So that's just another example of ways to alter an original loop so that there's no chance of it being detected in software. If you are using any sort of percussion loops, almost always I will make sure it's not the original tempo. I'll adjust it in that way. But this is actually one of the rare occasions where the kick and snare were kind of built in together, and I just thought it kind of worked, so I just ran with that. And then a lot of these other pieces are probably from Splice too, just little tops, hi-hat. Yeah, little stuff that I just kind of, normally when I'm creating, I'll just bring a bunch of stuff in that kind of sounds cool together. And then I'll play around with it in the midst of the track just to kind of see what works and what doesn't. And then at the end, I'll end up deleting probably 8 to 10, pieces that I just didn't use because they didn't end up getting into the track for whatever reason. So, yeah. Trying to think any last little bits of information to communicate before we shut this thing down. It's already after 9. I know we started a little bit late, but I don't want to make this video too long for anybody that's watching on YouTube later. Real quick rundown of some of the synths or the I guess virtual instruments that I use. Motobass I already talked about. Anna 2 from Slate, excellent plugin. Synthmaster 2 player, if I could say that correctly. This was like super cheap on sale. It's not, I don't know, it's like a bunch of presets. So don't buy it thinking that you can go tweak and like sound design stuff in here. But for a bunch of presets with random sounds, it was definitely worth the money. I found myself using that on random things where I just need kind of something different. So there's Anna 2 again. Those are guitars. Yeah, that's actually all in here. The other ones that I use a lot of are Pigments from Arturia. I will use Serum a ton for EDM stuff. And then I also, real quickly, let me talk about mastering with the last couple minutes. Important to probably clarify or at least double check, with your library as to what you're doing with your master. Maybe not always necessary, but I have had libraries specifically ask for nothing on the master. So this is probably a good time to talk about stems too. So like when I'm done with this, obviously I'm going to create a master stereo file, or in the whatever, kind of specifications that a library would need. Usually it's like 24, 48K, stereo wave file. And then after that, I am going to be muting everything except things that I'm going to group into a stem. So a stem is a group of audio tracks based on like the type of track it is. And it's probably easier just to show you than to try to explain it. So bass would be one. I would export this. This would be my bass stem, right? Since I could potentially put these together, but since this is kind of more of a lead sound, I actually would probably break these out unless the library asks for it differently. So I would have like, a regular synth stem and then like a lead synth stem, right? Electric rhythm. I'd probably put all the rhythm guitars together. Yeah, that would definitely be one stem, right? Vocals would be one. Drums would be one. I would export these all as one stem, and then all the effects I would export as one stem. So I'm sending them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stems that they can, or the editor can use at their discretion. Maybe the editor just wants to pull in my bass stem for something, or maybe they want to create a bass and drum loop and do something like that. They would have all those pieces. Yeah, excellent point, Paul. When I'm exporting these, I'm exporting it with the same length. If you know how Logic works, when you have this loop region, is that what it's called? When you have this on, it will export the track, the length of this selection. So other DAWs, I'm sure there's similar functionality that you have it specified as to where it starts and where it ends. The bass stem needs to be the exact same length as the actual stereo file. Same with the synth, everything else, so that when they pull all those stems in there, they all start at the same spot and they all end at the same spot. And there will be a bunch of dead space in there and only show like audio information where that specific track, comes in or whatever. So, yeah, very, very important that all your stems are the exact same length. Real quick, let me talk about Ozone. I do like Ozone. I use this a lot. I'm actually not even using it much here. I'm only using some of the clipping on the master. That was just to make it a little bit louder. And then this is one of my new favorite plugins. I absolutely love the God Particle. It does some weird voodoo magic. If you're one of the types of people that impulsively buy plugins and spend way too much money on stuff like this, plug your ears, because I love this thing. I don't know why it just sounds so good to me, but it is very easy to overdo it. Actually, let me let you hear it real quick. So I'll turn the limiter off, so it should keep the gain exactly the same, and then I'll let you hear what it's doing to the stereo image. If you don't have like headphones or studio monitors in front of you, it might be kind of hard to hear that, like if you're just watching on a device or something like that. But it definitely messes with the stereo field a lot. I feel like it kind of opens things up in a very kind of natural way, does some cool stuff under the hood. So, and it's got a limiter built into it. Fun plugin. Easy to overdo it. I've had quite a few mixes where I'm like, why did I go so hard with the God particle? I should have had it way down here or something. But yeah, fun to play with. Oh man, now I forgot where I left it. I'm not going to save this when I close it, so all my settings will go back. It should be good. So,
just to make it super easy for people, I pulled up a picture here. I'll pull this on screen. This is the reason all your stems need to be the same length.
Yeah.
If an editor pulls these in to like their session, like, so say if you can see this on the screen, there's like percussion, there's effects, there's a drone, there's Brahms. If they pull these in, they're all going to line up. So like, let's say if you look at the bottom of the screen, that synth stem, if you just started the stem where the audio starts, it's not going to line up with the rest of the song. So if they're making their own mix with the stems, nothing is going to line up. So this is why you need the silence. Every single stem needs to be the exact same length. That way they'll line up super neatly, just like that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's I think a lot of times people are surprised when they find out how, like, I was at a rally and they had an editor actually up there pulling in stems, and he was showing us how important they were for usage in shows. Like if he just wanted one piece of the track and then all of a sudden goes into the full track, having all that lined up ready to go at a moment's notice, super important. Yeah. So all right, well, I think we're probably at a stopping point. Definitely could talk about this a lot more and just kind of keep going with it, but probably a good place to stop so we don't make it too long. But
perfect.
Yeah. Appreciate everyone being a part of this. If you're interested in stuff like this, if you're just watching this, maybe brand new to sync or whatever, we have a whole community on Discord. If you don't know what Discord is, it's just kind of like, I wouldn't call it social media. It's kind of like an ongoing conversation with a bunch of people of similar interests. So it's like a chat room kind of, where we have a bunch of channels based on all of our sync, conversations are based, or all of our Discord conversations are based on sync. So the whole community is just based around education, support, helping one another, even collaborating, stuff like that. If that's something you're interested in, we do have a link on our YouTube page, right, Mark? Like it should be right there.
Yep, it's right at the top of the description, so super easy to find.
Yep. So we would love to have you a part of that community. You can come in, ask questions, learn more about this type of stuff. Yeah. Anything else that we need to cover? We're a little sad Terrell wasn't here with us. I knew he wanted to be, had something else come up. But yeah, we will hopefully see him back next month when we jump into our next event.
Yeah, and if you guys have any questions, like Andrew said, join the Discord server, and we can always do one of these again. I think we kind of hit the ground running a little bit late with some technical difficulty, so it's kind of just going with the punches. But we will definitely, we can do more of these. So if people have specific questions, if you or if you're watching the replay and you have a question of like, oh well, why did you do this, or how do you approach this, just post that in the Discord server. We can address it, and we can do more of these in-depth breakdowns. So
the questions, if they come up later, feel free to hit us up, because that's what we're there for, to kind of help and to educate and be assistance as much as possible. So
perfect. Well, we'll jump over to StreamYard for those of you that are in there, if you guys want to hang out. If not, we'll see you next month with another event, and join the Sinkhole Discord server, and we'll see you there.
Sounds good. Thank you guys.
Take care.